this time, I want to introduce the gentleman behind the scenes of Kill Your Darlings, director, co-writer, producer John Krokidas, and co-writer Austin Bunn.
Hello. Good morning, everybody.
And as usual, if you have a question, just raise your hand. We've got one here in the front. So do we have mics?
Yep.
Okay.
What was the division of creative responsibility between you two on the scripts? I mean, did one of you write the David scenes and the other one wrote the... I'm joking, but...
That would have been interesting.
Well, start with the inception.
So, I mean, probably like a lot of people in this room, I discovered the beats in college. I used to go to the campus bookstore and just track down the poetry collection, find Allen's books, and read them like they were some secret, like some, transmission from the future version of myself. Because I was a closeted young creative writer from New Jersey, so Allen Ginsberg's work meant the world to me. And so I had this really strong connection with Allen, and the beat biographies and the beat history. I'd read a lot of the back catalog, and I had come to John with the idea. So in terms of the division of responsibility, I would say like, really I would write the first draft, and then John would come in. And the thing about John, as you'll soon learn, you wanted to raise the emotional decibel level in every scene. I mean, John wanted the most riveting, the most vital, and least, how to put it, like, hagiographic version of this story. We didn't want to take the beat's greatness as a given. So John sort of demanded that we write a really emotional roller coaster. And so then we just went back and forth. John talks about it as the postal service, like the band version of producing a script, so emailing back and forth constantly. We were living in different cities at the time. I was at the University of Iowa's Writers' Workshop as a graduate student, and John was in New York finishing film school.
Austin wanted to do this as a play first. He was a playwright and a short story writer of some renown, and we're college roommates, and we shared ideas with each other, as college roommates and good friends do. But I, of course, started seeing the movie version in the back of my head, and I had just gotten out of NYU film school, and started convincing him that the play would be really flat and undramatic, but as a movie, this would be amazing. But I would say I'm the structure guy. I think coming from NYU's film program, I'm very traditionalist in terms of Sidney Lumet's Find Your Spine. And Austin is really wonderful with character and dialogue. If anything, he's on a religious crusade against expository dialogue. And I would write these 3, paragraph monologues for each character expressing their emotion, like that scene where Jennifer Jason Leigh finally turns to Allen to give him advice. I had the 2-page monologue version, and Austin crossed it all out and wrote the line that's in the movie, "The most important thing your father ever did was fail me," which said everything.
So kind of playing off of that, since the story, it's also very visual, too. It echoes the beats, energy, and such. How did you go about creating that look with Reed, the cinematographer? Because it's stunning. It's superb.
Thank you so much, and I'm so proud of what Reed brought to this film. I started off originally, the movie's set in 1944, and it's a murder story. And even in the writing process, I looked up and saw that Double Indemnity won Best Picture that year. And it was the year of Laura and Gilda and all these great American film noirs. So I said, why don't we incorporate this even into the fabric of the movie and start with the jail scene in a place of heightened tension, flash back to more innocent times, and then build again to see whether or not these characters can escape or not escape their fate. And so I started looking at noir stylings first, but I thought an academic recreation of film noir, who needs to see that? And again, going back to spine and theme, I thought what this piece was really about was young people finding their voice. So what about going from conformity, the row houses of New Jersey, the pillars of Columbia, to nonconformity? And of course, where film noir went in the hands of the French was the New Wave. So I thought, okay, well, let's start off with these controlled, composed, expressionistic lit shots, and then as the boys go down the rabbit hole together, let's take the camera off the tripod. Let's get some jazzier, freeform styling. So I made this book of the 1940s. I had learned that Ang Lee for the Ice Storm did a 50-page book on the 1970s with colors, fonts, important historical events, you name it. So I did that with the 1940s and then gave it to Reed. Now, the great thing is that I've learned on this is my first film, is you can do all the academic treatises you want, but then you hire great people. And she saw the goalposts of what I wanted, and then she showed me Jean-Pierre Melville's films. She showed me films that meant a lot to her, and then let kind of what I wanted filter through her own imagination. And what I'm amazed by specifically on her work is we did this movie in 24 days. Each scene was done in 2 hours or less. And the fact that she has the instincts to be like a documentary camera person, but yet is able to light like that at the same time. And then just lastly, we wanted to make sure this film felt relevant and contemporary today, and not just like a dated period piece. We never wanted this, even from the writing phase, to be a traditional biopic.
The greatest hits version of their life.
It was looking at Ryan McGinley photographs and youth, contemporary counterculture, young images of today, and then finding what connected them to the 1940s. What was resonant in counterculture then and today at the same time.
Question back there?
Hi, Ryan Rojas, Cinemacy. I was just wondering, first of all, congratulations, if I can call you a first-time director, just for this film. It's really fantastic. I'd like to know, what was the direction that you were giving your actors as far as, we were talking earlier with them, and they were saying that sometimes you pull them aside and for more dramatic scenes, but was there something like a consciousness that you went into to direct the film in how to direct the actors, or was there any kind of specific notes that you'd given them to kind of recreate this specific tone?
Here's the embarrassing story. Austin and I actually met freshman year because we were both acting in a production at Yale of The Lion in Winter.
Yes.
Neither of us were the greatest actors in the world, which is, I think, why we went into writing and directing.
I think leggings looked better on you than they did on me. That's what I would say about that.
But I trained as an actor, as an undergraduate, and what you learn is that each actor has their own method and their way of, it's whatever it takes for them to get the emotions to the surface. And so when I met with each actor that I cast, I would just simply ask them, have you trained? How do you like to work? And what don't you like? And and like Michael C. Hall gave me one of the greatest lessons in directing, which is he said, if what I'm doing is not making you happy, don't tell me that, because that'll make me self-conscious and it'll make me think about what I'm doing. Just tell me to add whatever you want to what I'm doing. And that's just a great lesson for life. Dan and I, when we were working together, we spent time before production. He was so generous and hardworking on this. He wanted to approach this like it was his first film, which was very poignant to me. And I said, would you like to try learning a new method and approaching acting in a different style? And he said, absolutely. So with Dan, he's so bright and in his head, and for the intellectuals, Meisner works really well, and focusing your action, what you're trying to do, on the other characters in the scene. Dane had trained extensively, and for Dane, what he does is creates a Bible for the character and does tons of research before production, and then he burns it and kind of starts really becoming the character on set. Ben Foster it's something I've never seen another actor do, which is once we've basically got the scene up on its feet, he goes and he does the blocking of the scene by himself in the location several times. He calls it the dance. Because once he's memorized the dance and knows the physicality, I need to pick up the fork here, I need to put it down there, he doesn't have to think about it anymore, and that's completely freeing to him. So it's like cooking this huge 7-course meal where you have to get every thing done at exactly the right time, but every plate needs a little bit of love in a different way. And so to me, I love working with actors. To me, the greatest thing was being able to get this dream cast and then just to work with them to find how they like to work and what got the best out of them.
Can I just add really quickly that, John, you had a really intuitive idea, which was to keep the actors from reading past this point in the biographies. So none of the actors came in burdened by the mythology of who these guys would become. They were just 19-year-old kids. So I think that was really smart, and it released the actors from having to play later decisions in their lives, the kinds of writers they would become. They just got to be young people. And that was a great relief, I think, for them.
Yeah, and for us too as writers. I mean, we were like, oh my God, we're tackling the beats.
Yeah,
How
our
are we
gods
going to
forgive
do
us.
this?
Our gods forgive us.
But then, I had a talk with Jack Huston once when he and I shared the same moment. Oh my God, I'm directing you as Jack Kerouac. We're like, no. You are Jack, who is a college student on a football scholarship, who hates the other jocks, who just wrote a book who he thinks it might be completely trite, and he just wants to get out of college and have some real life experience, join the war, so he can have real material to write his next book. That's who you are. And that just liberated all of us.
When writing the script, how much are you tied to the truth and how much are you allowed to take creative license?
We did so much research for this. I mean, we felt we had to. And I think part of it's our academic background.
Yeah.
Because there's so much in the biographies. I mean, there's so many biographies, rather, of them out there. But then also, we would find different accounts online, from example, from David Cameron's friends, who said that that relationship between him and Lucian was never portrayed accurately, and that Lucian actually kept coming back to David, and David was asking him to end the relationship. And then we may have broken into Jack Kerouac's college apartment together.
Yeah.
We
Well,
did
people
the
were
New
home.
York trick of pressing all the buzzers, and
It's
then
not that
somebody
hard to
let
find.
us in. But what's interesting is Columbia students were living there. They had no idea that they were in Jack Kerouac's apartment. So we physically went to all of the locations in which this movie took place, and that just helped inform our writing process
Yeah.
as well, getting to be able to visualize the actual spaces. Add to that, I went to Stanford University, to the Allen Ginsberg archives, and it wasn't about the lack of material out there. If anything, it was about making sure that we really just focused on who they were up until the point in which the movie takes place.
And just to add to that, I would say that I think the people that I know that have seen the film have been really surprised at how much is actually totally accurate. Like, the day after the murder, Allen Ginsberg went to the West End bar. You Always Hurt the One You Love was playing on the jukebox, and he wrote the poem that ends the film. I mean, it ends, "I am a poet." That is a line from August 20th, 1944. So we worked really hard to weave it in. But like John was saying before, we didn't want to do the dutiful, stuffy, every box checked kind of biopic that had been around for a while. We wanted to do something that felt more like in line with the spirit of the beats, that was more, specific and honest and transgressive. And I hope we got there.
Right here?
After watching this film, I think there's many things that the audience can get out of, and different emotions that the audience can get out of this. Did you guys have a goal, a specific goal of what you wanted to portray and what you wanted the audience to leave with, either of the time or the characters themselves?
What I want the audience to leave with is that feeling when we were 18 and 19 years old, just like these guys were in the movie, when everything seemed possible, and you knew that you had something important to say with your life, that you want to do something different and unique. Not just what your parents taught you, not just what school taught you, but you wanted to leave your mark on the world. The fact that after the movie, these guys actually did it and created, the greatest counterculture movement of the 20th century is amazing. But if this, I've had plenty of people come up to me after seeing the movie and said, this movie made me want to be a better writer. Or this movie made me want to go back and start playing music again. That to me means everything. That's ultimately deep in my heart why I wanted to make this movie.
And to think that change, the pivot point was this murder. I mean, the idea that I loved Allen Ginsberg for his openness and his honesty, and to think at one point in his life, he was called upon to defend his best friend in an honor slaying of a known homosexual, the very thing that like Ginsberg went on in his life to just defy and radically create change about, the idea of being in the closet and the shame around that issue. So that contradiction was really exciting to us dramatically.
This movie took, from the time that we started talking about this until the time that we're getting the chance to be with y'all today, over 10 years to make.
Yeah.
And Austin's right. When I really think about it, the thing that kept me going and kept me wanting to tell this story, I'd say that there needs to be something that pisses me off at night. The fact that in 1944 you could literally get away with murder by portraying your victim as a homosexual, that pissed me off to no end. And this isn't a political movie, and it's one scene, and it's obviously what informed how Lucian Carr got away with the murder. But for me, that was the thing that kept me up all night, that said, no, I have to tell this story.
Right here?
Hi, I'm Andrew Blumenthal from Creative Screenwriting Magazine. So you talked about the evolving visual aesthetic, going from the sort of rigid row houses to the more flowing, off the tripod stuff. But there's also a melange of different musical styles. You had jazz, you had some contemporary, like percussive stuff when they're, running around through the library, and then there's some classical piano. And, I know obviously in a practical sense you were filming the jazz stuff, but did you envision the different musical styles? Were you involved with the sound mixing and experimentation with all of that?
I originally wrote in this, remember my 50-page book, because I'm such a nerd, and my academic treatise, that I wanted a bebop jazz score similar to Miles Davis's score for Louis Malle' Elevator to the Gallows, because bebop, the transition from swing to bebop at this time was exactly what these guys wanted to do with words, go from rhythms, 1, 2, 3, to exploding them into something beautiful. My music supervisor, Randall Poster, said to me, John, put down your academic treatise, put down your paper, go make your movie. your child's going to start becoming the person that he or she wants to be. So I went and I made my movie, and then I put jazz music on the film, and it didn't work at all. And then I went and did only period accurate music, and it felt like Woody Allen's Radio Days. Which is a great movie, but it's not the young rebellious movie about being 19 and wanting to change the world that we wanted to make. So I actually went back to the playlists that Austin and I used while writing this movie. And I used Sigur Rós. I used the lead singer's solo album, Yancey's album. Stuff that was timeless but contemporary, and it brought the movie to life. And then I realized that Nico Muhly, the composer, had arranged all of those albums and worked with Grizzly Bear and Bjork and other people that we were using as temp track. And so we got the movie to Nico, and just thankfully he loved it. So now that I knew I had contemporary music in a period film, then we get to that heist sequence. I had heist period music on it. It was so corny. The sequence didn't work. It didn't have any stakes to it. And I can academically tell you, well, yeah, the beats, come on. They led to the hippies, which led to the punks, and the punks led to Kurt Cobain in the 90s working with Burroughs and their history with independent alternative music. But the truth is, while I can intellectualize it, you go with what's visceral and what feels honest and true to you. And when I put that track, I just stuck my phone into the computer, played that track, it brought the scene to life, and it gave it the kind of energy and rebelliousness of the spirit of the movie that we had been wanting to write, and had been working on for so long. So it kind of, that evolved too. I think for me the biggest lesson from making my first film is do all your homework, do all your research, know what you're doing, but then don't be afraid to get out of the way if your movie starts telling you what it should be doing.
And none of the different styles clash. They seem to have
to
make sense, for their context. So.
Right there.
First of all, brilliant job, guys. Absolutely
Thank you.
Brilliant. In taking a look at the construct of the script itself, you've got different dialogue beats that hit, and most notably with your incorporation of recitations by Yeats, Henry Miller, and whatnot. How did you decide what to put in, and then how did you work with the actors in establishing the cadence and the elocution on those? Because your pentameter is totally different than the rest of the structure.
What a great question. If you know any of the beat history, this new vision was real for them, and they've written volumes about it, and none of which makes any sense that we couldn't make heads or tails of it.
Did you all remember your journals when you were 20 years old, or those conversations you had at 3 in the morning with other college students? We got to read their version of it, and there's a reason that we hide all of our journals and don't let them see the light of day.
It was challenging. With the uninhibited, uncensored expression of the self, that's actually an incredible quote directly from the Ginsberg New Vision Manifesto. So in some ways we knew we had to distill some of that material from the Ginsberg journals to help make the argument for how valuable this manifesto was, and the irony, honestly, of what transpires in the plot, right? Which is the very thing that Allen's called to do, is create this censored version of history. So, but in terms of the poetry itself, really challenging, because as we all know, there are movies about poets and writers when recitations happen, and they're really flat, and they can be corny, and they're the time you tune out of the movie, and you're like, okay, I'm waiting for the poetry to end. Specifically, I think of Allen's first poem that happens on the boat. We were really challenged to kind of find a poem that would speak to audiences, but was genuinely an Allen Ginsberg poem written in his voice. And his early work is quite rough and honest and burdened by trying to impress his dad and impress his professors. And so what we had to do was really channel Allen. And when John had the concept of, this isn't a poem that he's just reading to impress people, it's a poem he's reading to Lucian Carr. And the audience knows that, you know that, and Lucian finds it out on that boat at that moment. And that really gave me permission to kind of rethink what the poem was going to do and how we'd make it. And so we came upon the method of Allen's very own method, which was kind of magpies, stealing from the American vernacular and going out and finding common speech and repurposing it, creating this kind of Whitman-esque inclusion. So you hear in the poem things that you've already heard in the film, just like Ginsberg did himself. So things like Allen in Wonderland is reworked in the poem. Unbloomed stalwart is the very thing that David said to him in the party. So we're kind of hopefully paying off not just a poem that's emotionally powerful, but also something of the method that Ginsberg would use for the rest of his life.
And Radcliffe is such a hard worker. He gave me, while he was on Broadway doing a musical, we would meet once a week for 2 months before even pre-production and rehearsal began to work on the accent and to work together. And so I have on my iPhone him reading Hal. And we looked for we didn't look at the later recordings, we looked at the earliest vocal recordings possible of Allen Ginsberg to make sure that we were capturing the voice of who he'd become, but his voice at that time and what his reading voice was like. And then to be honest, it's just really telling the actor, you're not performing a poem, you are letting Lucian know that he is loved with this poem and that you love him and that you can see inside him. And it's playing the emotion underneath the poem, which was the direction.
Good, time for one more question.
What does it do for you when all of the main characters are gay? Because normally you've got the female characters who can be a love interest, but they're not going to be a rival, they're not going to be, they have, usually even now in films and in life, there's a separate role, whereas if you're all the same gender, you can all be anything to each other. I'm sorry, you're looking at me like that made no sense.
Well, I think this is a movie of every character discovering what their sexuality is, gay, straight, bi, all over the place, and more importantly, whether or not they're worthy of being loved. You know, and I personally don't know if Lucian Carr was straight or gay, and to me it's irrelevant, because I've seen this relationship play out amongst gay people that I know so many times, where an older man who is gay and a younger man of questionable sexuality develop such a close bond. And you know, the stereotype I think would be is that the younger man had an absent father figure, or finds the older man's confidence and just the care and nurturing qualities of them very attractive. And what happens though is those two get so intimate that ultimately there's nowhere else to take the relationship but sexual. And when that happens, then the power position in that relationship twists. And the younger man suddenly realizes that he holds the power because he's the sexually desired one. And that's where a lot of conflict ensues. You know, whatever you read about that relationship between Lucian and David, you know, using contemporary terms, everyone knew they were codependent. Everyone knew it was toxic and going to end badly. Nobody knew it was going to end in murder.
And let me just say quickly too, I think a lot of the biopics we see are kind of denatured of their sexual qualities and the edginess of the relationships in them, and so I think we were trying to do something that restored some of that ambiguity, lust, desire, confusion that is genuinely in the Beats history. So it wasn't like we were not making that up.
Well, again, congratulations.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much for your
Thanks
questions.
for being here.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
everybody.
Good luck, everyone.